I was trying to put a round peg in a square hole. I was trying to have expectations of something that he either didn't know how to do, wasn't willing to do, wasn't aware he was supposed to do. You know, somebody can only do as much as they can. And I guess if they don't know how they're supposed to be, you know, I didn't have the language to tell, or the wherewithal to, at a young age, to tell him, this is what I need as your son.
Well, hello, lovely listener. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Breaking the Blocks. I'm Rachel Pearman, your host. And in this episode, I'm talking to recent QuiltCon winner, Scott Culley. Now, the interesting thing is that I conducted this interview quite a few weeks ago before anything was known about QuiltCon and the winners. And the reason that I wanted to talk to Scott was because of this piece that he's just won first place with at QuiltCon. It's called Shadow, and it's got a really touching story behind it, which I really resonated with. And I think if you've ever had any relationship issues in your family, you may also resonate with this piece. So I hope that you enjoy this conversation about this piece at length, but of course about Scott's other work and the blocks that he has had to overcome. Well, hello, lovely Scott. I always start every interview with hello, lovely Scott, hello, lovely Carolina, but I genuinely mean it because I do think you crafty folk are all absolutely lovely people. I do.
Well, thank you.
Crafty folk, that sounds a little bit condescending, isn't it? Do you know,
No,
Scott,
no, not at all.
We should have a discussion about the word craft, though, you know, because I don't know. It's like I call my company Crafty Monkeys, and I sometimes think it sounds like a nursery or something. And I imagine 3-year-olds painting. And actually, I'm working with these incredible artists and quilters like yourself. And it is interesting, the word crafty. I mean, craft, it used to be seen, I think, as a really kind of great word in terms of like actors would work on their craft, you know, craftsmen would work for hours. And yet somewhere along the lines, it became, I think some people kind of saw it as an almost derogatory term, you know, oh, it's crafty, it's crafting. I don't know. What do you think about that word?
Well, when I hear, you know, when you say someone is crafty, you know, I think it comes across as more as their ingenuitous. I don't know if that's a word, but like they're using their ingenuity. They're being creative. They're being they're finding new ways to do the same thing. So I don't think it's derogatory. I think it's kind of a compliment if you can find better ways to do things or anything like that. So
yeah. Okay. Well, we'll say it's good then. You lovely crafty folk. It's good. Well, you are certainly very crafty in terms of if we're talking about all those lovely words you just said, you know, finding different ways to do things and doing them very well. I should explain to people that I've just started working with you, Scott, because I was drawn to your work without knowing anything about you. First of all, when I went to the Festival of Quilts this year, and I saw that amazing RuPaul piece. And it just took my breath away because I just thought the kind of life in the quilt, the life in his face, how you had created it. And then when I went up close and saw the tiny pieces, it was just amazing to me that someone could actually do that. First of all, are you a RuPaul fan?
Oh, yeah. You know, just I think his story is fantastic. I think, you know, where he's come from and where he is put himself, I think is, you know, there's the the American way, so to speak, of, you know, pulling yourself up and making this great kingdom that he's made for himself when he started off as a go-go dancer in New York. So I think it's very inspirational of what you could do, especially in a time when being gay or queer was something that you didn't talk about, you didn't want to express. So I kudos to him for what he's made for himself. And yeah.
I had a friend once who I said to him, I just don't know whether to do this thing that I was talking about. And he said to me, you know what, I always ask myself in these moments. And I thought he was going to come up with something really philosophical. And I said, no. And he said, I always say, what would Ru do? And I was like, what? And
Yeah,
then I got introduced, and I think that's the thing that he says to himself, doesn't he? What would I do? And my friend at that time said he would strap on his glittery little skirt and he would walk into that studio and say, "I'm back," because he's got to pay the bills. I won't
yeah.
go into that, but that was a great. But it made me. It helped me to make my decision because
Right.
I thought, yes, what would RuPaul do? Because he is amazing. So
Yeah.
you chose RuPaul as a piece,
Hmm.
as a portrait piece, and how did you Scott? Because I was talking to someone yesterday about your work, and I said, I don't even know where I would start because do you do a sketch? Is it computerized? How you come up with all the different? 'Cause it's tiny, tiny pieces that make a face.
Right. So that piece is very interesting, how it came to be and the process in which I used to design it and all that stuff. So I had started the first there. So the RuPaul piece is the second piece of a three-piece series about masking. And my first mask was a luchador mask that I had done, and I had done that one for two reasons. Because the first part was for this series, and the second reason why I had done that one was because luchadors are really cool. And when I got into quilting, I started doing paper piecing to do the things that I like to see, right? So, and then the second reason was to do this whole mask series and this idea of masking and what we're hiding and what we're trying to portray to other people. And so, as a part of that series, I wanted to show different types of masks, right? So, the luchador, very literal, and he never took off that mask even when he was buried. So, like, nobody besides probably his wife and kids ever knew what he really looked like. So, he was always portraying this luchador fighter, machismo exterior. So I wanted to kind of like flip that on its head a little bit, and I wanted to portray a mask that someone put on that is maybe controversial, that is showing your true self, and not necessarily one that is made up or fictitious. So, and listening to a bunch of interviews of RuPaul, he talks about that he felt his most power when he was, especially during his punk drag days, when he was young, that he felt the most power over his audience. And I was like, oh, well, I've got to do RuPaul. I've got to do, I mean, because that makes so much sense, right? To be able to put on all this drag to be who you really are. I went through and was, looking for images of Ru. I had found a couple that I liked, and talking to my editors, who happened to be my 10-year-old daughter and my husband, um, found found an image we both really liked, and kind of played around with different filtering softwares and stuff like that to find the right color tones and palettes and stuff like that. And then I take that image into the computer, and especially with Illustrator, and I just start drawing lines over it to start making my fabric pieces and my pattern. The problem with that I keep finding is that I use the zoom tool a little too much. So you can zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, and find, oh, there's that little bit of color. That'll, especially in like the eyes. The eyes are really fantastic to me because there's so much detail, and they tell such a story. And so you just find those little pieces, and the when you go to print out your pattern and you have these little tiny things of fabric, you start to curse yourself a little bit because everything's bigger in
Yeah.
reality because it's all got seam allowances and things like that. So, but yeah, the zoom tool is definitely something that is a blessing and a curse, because you do get into these really small things, but it can add so much more detail. The pieces are small, but I think when I actually get into sewing it, then if it's absolutely too small, if the sewing of the seams is going to be bigger than the actual piece, then I kind of self edit it out and kind of shift things around. But yeah, no, that piece was a lot of fun once I got it done. So the luchador, there was 600, 700 pieces of fabric in that piece. So I went from that to the RuPaul, which is over 4,000 pieces of fabric.
Wow. Mm.
Um, so I really stepped it up, I think, and I think it really paid off. So
And how long did it take you to do then from when you started sewing it?
when it took me about 400 hours to piece the RuPaul piece. Yeah,
Yeah. It's amazing. It's an amazing piece of work. Like I say, I
thank
walked
you.
around. I mean, I'm very drawn in by faces. I'm very drawn into portrait work. And then I turned the corner and just saw this RuPaul and was like, wow, it was the hair, the eyes, the movement, the strength. He was almost looking like a lion in that. He was very fierce,
Yeah,
very confident. I just thought it was absolutely wonderful. It really, did something to me, which I guess is what you want your audience to feel when they look at a piece of work.
yeah, and just hearing you speak, it reminds me of another piece of that I really wanted to try to convey, and that was the dress that he's wearing. It's got a lot of tulle, and it's got a lot of There's I think there's this big flower piece that comes up, and it's very kind of light and delicate. And it's like, well, how can I portray that in color through solid color fabric, but still make it look light? And so it was. I think it turned out really well. I'm really happy with the color choices, and I think it just kind of showing that kind of the big boldness of the hair. The face is very striking. Then this lightness of the flower in his dress that is able to come through. So,
Yeah. And so were you happy with it when you'd finished, or were you
oh yeah,
just, yeah,
yeah. Very happy. I was these pieces when you do them on the computer and then you break them all, you break apart all the pieces and you sew it all together. It always amazes me that it will always look like the pattern that I made in the beginning, and it's very satisfying to be like, yes, I did it. That
yeah,
was that was my idea, and that was my intention. So
yeah. But of course, the biggest critics of that piece, not the judges at the quilt festival, the husband and the daughter. What did they think? Because they helped you choose the image. Were they happy with the finished result?
I think so. I think so. They're pretty happy with it the way it turned out. So
How does your daughter feel about having a dad who's a quilter? Is she into quilting and fabrics and arts? Is she creative?
she's very creative. She's more into drawing a little bit. I'm slowly trying to get her into quilting, and she's started a sparkles lava lamp pattern.
Yes.
So she's started with that. She's gonna try to do something with that and make some sort of quilt with that. But slowly, it's coming. So
Yeah, it's there. It's
yeah,
there. It's in there. A little while later, you put up your next piece, and I don't think straight away I assumed that it was yours. I think I just saw it on Instagram
right.
and then realized it was yours. But that piece really spoke to me, and it is of a man. And you talk about the shadow side of our characters, and
Mm.
you mentioned divorce, which is something that was right up my street at that moment. Not that I'm getting divorced, but that I was a child of divorced parents. And my father died last year, and there were a lot of unresolved issues that will now never be resolved. But I've learned to let go. That's the thing you have to do. But I've been working through that process for the last 2 years. So when I saw that piece again, it absolutely spoke to me. And you put in your write up that you were a child of divorce. So let's talk about that piece then.
The shadow piece is kind of starting another series. Um, but you described it perfectly. It's this idea of examining complex relationships and how to navigate those relationships. So my mother and father divorced when I was very, very young. And although my father never lived far away, it wasn't, and he was always a part of our lives, but it wasn't a father son relationship. I'm the youngest of four kids. So my brothers and sisters had a much different relationship with my father than I did. And what really made me want to do this piece was I was looking at how I father my own kids and the amount of time that my husband and I put into them and how much we care about, you know, every facet of their lives and trying to, if there's a deficit somewhere, how do we get the help that they need to fix that or, things like that. I never really felt that from my folks. My mom was a single mother for a while and she really had to work to keep everybody clothed and fed and in school. And so it just kind of really made me think, was like, okay, so why did things happen the way they were? And why was it, was it out, was it out of, it wasn't out of anything hurtful, or it wasn't out, it wasn't, he wasn't doing anything mean. It was just kind of, the situation that it was. And he he wasn't necessarily neglectful, but he wasn't present.
Mm,
If that makes any sense.
yeah, yeah.
So because he didn't necessarily raise me, he was kind of there. My mom refers to him as like my uncle father, right? So he was kind of more of an uncle, even though biologically he's my father. So in the part of that, he wasn't very fatherly, but yet I feel like I'm almost a carbon copy of him.
Oh, that's interesting.
We look almost identical. We have just all these mannerisms that are exactly the same. And but yet I wasn't, so it's that nature nurture, divide. So I have a lot of him in me, and yet there wasn't any like nurture part in there.
Mm.
So that's why I wanted to do this piece. And the picture, the face is of him at 17. Um,
Ah, okay.
so when he was graduating high school. And the pattern, there's a local artist, a painter by the name of Lee Wagstaff, who does these beautiful portraits of people, but they emerge out of patterns. And so I was seeing his work, and I'm like, yeah, that's really cool. I really like that. I wonder if I can do that in fabric. And so then just kind of the pieces all started to go together. It's like, well, okay, well, what face do I do, and why do I do it? And so all these pieces started to fall together into this project. And yeah, and it was, there were 215 blocks of these snail shell patterns. And I spent about 2 hours, at least 2 hours a day, sewing 2 or 3 blocks. And it was very cathartic. Yeah. I mean, it made me think a lot about the relationship that I had with him, or, you know, the relationship I had, and like the lack of the father son relationship that we had. Um, and how I wanted there to be a father son relationship. And I felt like once I got through the end of all this sewing and really thinking about it, it's like I was trying to put a round peg in a square hole. And I was trying to have expectations of something that he either didn't know how to do, wasn't willing to do, wasn't aware he was supposed to do. So it was a little bit of on both sides, right? I mean, you can only have, somebody can only do as much as they can. And I guess if they don't know how they're supposed to be, I didn't have the language to tell, or the wherewithal to, at a young age, to tell him this is what I need as your son. I had no idea. So it's just this. It was all this stuff coming together and trying to feed it out, and so.
I'm interested because you said that he had a much better relationship with your brothers and sisters
Hmm.
than with you. Why was that then?
I think just because he was around when they were younger. My
Okay.
sister, who's my next sibling, is 6 years older than I am. She had kind of this half and half relationship, and then my oldest brother's 10 years older, so he had a much closer bond with my father than my sister and I do. So my sister kind of half and half between me and my other brothers and stuff. So I think they just had more of a bond with him
Mm.
than we did.
You said something interesting as well about trying when you said fitting the square peg into a round hole. I absolutely understand that. And I was talking to someone yesterday, and they had lost. She had lost her mother to cancer, and when the diagnosis came in, I think she hoped that it would be a different way that it ended, and that they would come to some resolutions because they'd had a very difficult relationship, and they didn't. And she said, "What I've had to learn to do is to let go," and she said, because otherwise someone lives rent free in your head.
Mhm.
And she said, "But also I realized that I had to let go of the fantasy of what that relationship could have been." And I really felt that you have to let go of that kind of that fantasy, but that's not meaning that they're a bad person.
Exactly. Exactly.
So when you were working through your, I mean, you were obviously creating his face. Can I ask, first of all, has your father died?
No.
So
No.
has he seen, so have you talked about this piece? Do you talk?
No, I haven't spoken to my dad in about 2 years.
Right.
That's just, that, and that's part of it. I mean, we just don't have that relationship. And so that was kind of a one thing, cuz my brothers and sisters follow me on Instagram, so they know kind of, the things that I'm doing. And I got a note from my oldest brother and was like, he's like, "What's this about? What are you doing?" You know, and so I kind, I explained it, and he was like, "Oh, all right, I didn't realize that." Da, da, da. So it was interesting, to say the least, to kind of throw this out there and kind of put what I'm dealing with inside out for everybody to see. But I think the process of going through it was more beneficial than any kind of, and not to say that there's any backlash, because I don't think there's anything negative about this piece at all, other than it's my own processing of a complex relationship.
Yeah. Were you hoping that he would see it and reach out?
Um, I don't know, to be honest. It definitely wasn't put out there as a call,
Mm.
if that makes sense. Is that it wasn't, that's not why I had done that, because it's not something I'm looking to, I'll say, rekindle. I mean, it's, our relationship is what it is, and I have no hard feelings or anything towards him or anything like that. Um, it's just kind of navigating what it is. So
And did you, when you stopped talking 2 years ago, did you have a kind of big blow up end, walk
no,
away,
not
or
no, no,
you
no,
just
not at all.
drifted
It
apart?
just, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, and partly the only reason why, so I had gone back to the States to see, kind of, I'd gone to the QuiltCon in Phoenix, and my sister had come down and joined me for that. And so we flew back together back home. And so I was able to see everybody again, because being in Berlin and my family's on the west coast of the US, we don't see each other hardly ever. And I hung out with my dad, had lunch with him. It was all very, very great. But after I went home, and there's a 9-hour time difference between the west coast and here, so we just don't hear from each other.
No.
So
It is sad when, but so many people do have that disconnect with their parents. It's not,
yeah,
it's not like you and I are the only ones,
yeah.
but it is sad. I mean, in your case, there may be a chance for resolution. There may be a chance to work it through. I think yesterday in one of my interviews, it was Dee of Pixel Quilts, said her motto is, "It's not no, it's not yet." It's, we
It's
don't
very
know
true.
yet.
We don't
We
know.
don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. So when you're working through this piece, I mean, I guess in terms of, breaking the blocks, which is what we're talking about,
Hmm.
obviously there is a blockage there between you and your father. There is a blockage in your, I was going to say in your heart. It's not in your heart, but there are blocks for you. There is pain for you there. So you were working through it in this fabric. How do you think it actually helped you? How did the process help you when you were manipulating those pieces of fabric, and when you were looking at his face, and when you were putting them together? Because I kind of feel like, I think I've just said it there myself, but it's for you to answer. But was it almost like putting a jigsaw together and
It,
actually
it
finding the pieces?
It was in a sense, but I think what really the main part of it was slowing down. And because you're sewing the piece, you're ironing it, you're grabbing the next one, getting their fabric ready, you're sewing it. It's just this kind of repetitiveness, and you're slowing down, and you're able to kind of take a moment and just ingest all this stuff. And it was kind of because the way I was putting these pieces together, I didn't see what the finished product was until I started laying out all the pieces. And because I wasn't doing them in order necessarily, so I do all the easy ones first and then work towards the hard ones towards the end. And so, you don't see it coming together until you start putting all these patches out on the floor or on the design wall and seeing this thing come together. Yeah, I think it's just the biggest part is just slowing down. And I think, the day-to-day work, I'm an architect half the time, so that's always kind of very fast paced and always trying to get stuff out the door and da 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 da. The kids are is not a walk in the park, so that's always go go go. Um, but so my time to sew is my time to slow down, and I can actually digest and think about, and yeah, so
It's amazing, how, because, I've been interviewing a few people now, and actually the sort of word meditative comes through so many times. People
mhm,
find their sewing to be a very meditative process. And I wonder if that's changed over the years in quilting, because now we're all so much more self aware. I mean, that's perhaps why your father is as he was, and my father was as he
yeah,
was. It's a generational thing. Boys don't cry, don't feel, da da da.
exactly,
And still, sadly, some people are taught that today and they grow up with
yeah.
issues. But I do wonder if quilting has always been a kind of meditative process for people, but they just didn't realize it. So when, people first started making, do, and mending, and just, sewing these pieces of fabric for something which would give them warmth, I wonder if they actually, even on a subconscious level, found it, it wasn't just necessity. It was a meditative process. It was something they chose to do. I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I do feel like, because mental health issues now are so much more known about and talked about, that we are relating creativity
Yeah.
to helping our mental health. I wonder if it's always been that way. It's just that we're recognizing it more now.
It very well could be. I think there was also some aspect of community because I know, it kind of the Pennsylvania Dutch and whatnot, when they would quilt, it was this big, all the mothers, the grandmothers, the daughters would all get together and they would all work on different parts of the quilting, right? Because it was all hand done and it was all, so I think that part, and it's, now that with the machines and all that, we can kind of do this by ourselves. So I think that's kind of brought it inwards a little bit. But yeah, I think most definitely it's a um, great chance to kind of come back to yourself and
Yeah.
um, yeah,
But I think also, as well, it's a very expressive art form now. Perhaps in the past it wasn't. Perhaps when people, I mean, saying that, when I look at Geesben quilts, it's kind of like improv quilting right there for
yeah,
you.
yeah,
So it's not that it's a new thing. I do wonder if quilting is becoming more expressive, like you have done this piece about your father. I think about Chris English with his political statements
yeah.
that he makes. I do wonder if people are really beginning to express themselves. It's almost like the quilt has become a canvas, but instead of paint, it's fabrics.
Very much so.
Mm,
Very much so. There's always I'm trying to there's I think there's always been a lot of political quilts for I think people have been doing it. I think it's becoming more common, especially like you say, it's becoming more of a canvas. I think that is more so now than historically. But yeah,
okay, so you've been working through those issues for 2 years. Do you feel in a better place now for having created these pieces, these mask pieces, which, of course, the piece about your dad was about, I guess, in a way, someone is wearing a mask. It's the shadow side of someone, it's what's underneath. So, has that helped you in terms of it's being a kind of 2 year therapy process?
I think so. I've been able to put to bed a lot of imposed resentment for, you know, like I was saying, it was my expectations that were probably incorrect and not anything malicious that he was doing as a parent or misguided as a parent. However we want to talk about it, but and trying to come to terms with those expectations, realize that you know the relationship isn't what I thought it was, and it wasn't what I should expect it to be. I think coming to terms with those ideas helps a lot. Yeah, I mean it's just kind of really kind of closed that. It's kind of brought closure to that kind of idea and those the thoughts of anything that it was anything that was coming from his side. I feel that it was more kind of, like I said, my expectations and all that. But being able to put those feelings to bed, bring closure to that, I can now go on to something else. I can find something else to ruminate about. Uh,
Yeah.
but no, but once those thoughts are closed, you have some clarity, and you can kind of see better. So
Yeah, and it's so important to do that self-reflection, and it's really interesting to hear you talk about your part of that relationship. As you say, you had expectations that perhaps weren't realistic, and that's not to put the blame on you at all, but it's really good to see the part that you played in that
yeah,
relationship, because then you won't do it again.
exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, what is the next thing then to be ruminated on? what's what's the next issue? Welcome to my therapy couch.
Exactly. Um, no, the next piece I'm thinking, I got the piece I did with the three faces, which is about this idea of stoicism and stoicism. And you had kind of brought it up earlier, this idea of boys don't cry and act like a man, and this kind of thing. Don't show emotion, whatever. So that was the third mask, right? This idea of all these emotions put together, don't show any emotion. So the idea I wanted to bring out was that there are all these emotions mashed together, and then with a filter, a red, blue, green filter, you could then start to pull out what those were. I got a lot of great reaction from people from that quilt. It's not my favorite quilt, but I've got a lot of interesting conversations and a lot of neat reactions from people from that quilt. I think I want to play with that technology of the colors and being able to separate those colors again, but put it into this idea of a pattern creating faces. So I think the next piece will be very busy. So it'll be a pattern with all this other stuff kind of hidden inside of it. And I think what I want to do is I want to start looking at myself a little bit as far as coming out in my mid 20s, trying to understand who I am, this whole kind of coming to terms with my family, my sexuality, where my place is in the world, do some self reflection on that. I think that'll come out in terms of a very busy looking quilt. So,
And where is your place in the world, do you think? Have you started on
oh,
that
I
road?
don't know. I have, I don't know.
What is this world? I mean, I ask myself sometimes. Sometimes I feel like we're in the Truman Show. I do. I feel like we're in the Truman Show sometimes. There's someone up there having a laugh with us all, moving us around,
Yeah.
going, let's put those two together. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah. I envy people. And this is kind of this thing too is, I was about to say, I envy people who look like they have their shit together, but I really don't think anybody has their shit together.
no,
It's just,
no.
it's just what they portray out to the world to make it look like they do, or it's our interpretation of that they have their stuff together. I think it'll be an interesting process to go through and kind of see where I end up. But
Yeah. Can you envisage that your quilting will change quite a lot as you go through that process, do you think? Or do you think, no, I've got my style now. I know my niche, and that's where I'm going to kind of stay, but develop that through the feelings that I have?
um, I don't know. It kind of depends on what the next topic is.
Yeah.
It, I really liked how I really liked how the shadow quilt kind of intertwined these different techniques and what I wanted to express. And I feel the same way with the next one of bringing in, two different techniques and kind of getting that all meshed together, see how that turns out. I don't know what the future holds. I started off doing foundation paper piecing, doing images people had already come up with, and I think that's fine for starting out. And just kind of as I progress more through my craft and quilting and all that, I think it'll be much more original things coming out of my head. So
Yeah. I think the one thing that I feel you're really onto with your quilting, not that I'm a judge or any knowledge whatsoever, but just on a personal basis and from talking to you, I think you're very um, switched on in regarding your emotions and where you're at. I think you're very open to exploring yourself. I think you're very open to showing your vulnerability. I mean, all of these are amazing qualities and they're really rare in people. So I think it's fantastic that you have all of that and all of that insight. And what I love about your pieces are, as you say, the different sides. And I love that, as you were talking there about the colorways, bringing out different facets of the personality within one image. That it's really interesting to me, that concept, because I think that's the thing. When you look at a person, you can look at them and go, I've got you. But actually, if you were
you
able to
don't.
look through a magic glass,
Yeah.
you would see they're like fractured. It's like a fractured person. You would see all of these issues that people have. And I think that's what you bring out in your work. You bring out those fractured pieces. Like even with the RuPaul, you've got this strength, but you've got this amazing vulnerability with him. And that's why I loved that piece. And then with your shadow quilt, there was just something, like you say, it was just that shadow that follows us around. So I think
Yeah.
you've absolutely got that down. So I can't wait to see what you do
Well, thank
next.
you. Thank you very much.
Not that there's any pressure.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you could always quilt me.
That's true. That's true. Maybe we'll have to figure something out.
That's the narcissist in me right there. It's all about me. No. Um, yeah, I think it's very interesting.
Well,
Well,
thank you.
it's been fantastic to talk to you, Scott, to learn a bit more about your work and about you and your thoughts behind your pieces. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us and for really being vulnerable. I really appreciate it. And I wish you continued luck on your journey of self-discovery. I'll be looking very closely at everything you do now. Oh, he's realised that about himself.
Oh no.
I see that now. But
Oh.
thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I really do appreciate it. And if you'd like to be involved with the show in any capacity, all you have to do is drop me an email, hello@breakingtheblocks.com. And of course, if you'd like to follow a creative pursuit, if you'd like to learn some of the skills that our guests are talking about, you can in our Zoom classes over on craftymonkeys.com. The details are on the screen right now, or of course, in the bio underneath.